Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started for our public works session. There are 4 board members in attendance, and that is all that's going to be in attendance tonight. So thank you all for coming. We have quite a lengthy pack to go through, I believe. We are scheduled to end by 6:30. I actually need to leave at 6:15 for a kid pickup, so I'll give the mic to Dale to wrap things up at the end. And I think, Dr. Phillips, if you can just kind of go one by one, and board members, we can speak up if we have questions, suggestions. If anybody else would like to provide input or has a question, just raise your hand, let us know, okay? That's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Wielden. This is, we've referenced several times, this is the last package of the transition from Neola policies to the policy organization with the help of Church Hill and Antrim. Thank you, Julia, for coming again this evening to help address any questions from the board. There are 28 policies in this package, most of them clearly replacing other existing Neola policies, but there are a few in here that are new policies that are suggestions from Church Hill and Antrim based on the most recent legislative session or just other circumstances as they come about. This package will be on, this is today's work session. That'll be on a first reading at the October 20th meeting, second reading November 17th. So the first policy, thank you, Mr. Nowlin, and thank you to Sherry and Corinne, have them printed out for you in front of you as well. If you try to get onto Board Docs today, you know that Diligent, which is the company that owns Board Docs, was down today and you couldn't access any of these digitally, which made preparing for this evening a little bit challenging. So they got them all printed out for you so that you can write on them if you need to. But the first policy in this package is B200. We originally had this sent to us back last fall, but knew these were changing after the legislative session, so we waited to adopt it. In the meantime, the one that we sent out to you in the folder last week and the week before, it was the older version. The second version in the packet in front of you right now is the accurate version. So flip past the first version, and you'll see one that starts on about the 4th page that has much smaller text. It is updated. There are highlighted sections. Sorry for those of you in the audience, but essentially there are 3 very important changes to this policy that are a result of the 2025 legislative session. Number 1 is that the eligibility to be a board member, the age changed from 21 to 18 years of age. The filling of a vacancy of a board member changed, that if the vacating board member identified as a candidate from a political party, that party caucus chooses the replacement, whereas the existing practice takes place for anyone who's not declared a part of a political party as a candidate, whereas the board would vote to interview and select that replacement. That's as a result of the most recent legislative session. And then last, compensation is that Roman numeral 10 on the sheet. The maximum compensation is equivalent of 10% of the lowest teacher starting salary. I need to make an adjustment as I read this. So this reads the annual compensation shall be. What we need to change that to is the maximum allowed. I'm going to do that on my paper right here. The maximum allowed annual compensation for each board member shall be equivalent to 10% of the lowest starting salary for the starting teacher salary. So for this coming year in January, the board will need to decide whether or not they wish to adopt the same salary, which had been for decades. $2,000 a year was the maximum allowed by law. The starting teacher salary for this year is $50,950, and so the board could choose to select a salary of anywhere between $2,000 per year, or I should say anywhere less than the $5,095 per year. I see Julia's nodding over there, so
So
that
do-
could be done during the January organizational session each year.
Okay.
And we do that now as part of the January package. Sherry puts together lots of authorizations, one of them being a resolution establishing the salary for that year.
And so do we need to change this? The statute allows us to go up to 5,000, but if we want to keep it at 2,000, can we just leave the language as it is? Or should we not?
Want to give the board, a future board flexibility, then you would want to change it now. There's nothing that would stop you from choosing to leave it at $2,000 going forward. But if you leave the policy limiting you to 2,000, then obviously you're limited to 2,000.
But the board does vote on a resolution every January.
I would be inclined to keep your policy at the cap and set it in January, because if we put the number in the policy, your process for changing policies is more cumbersome than the January meeting.
If we were to say, instead of put equivalent of 10%, just say that annual compensation for each board member is consistent as defined with state law X, and then if the state law ever changes, we don't have to update our policy. And so now that helps us and it helps all future, and then the dollar amount would be a budget line item that we would have to vote on. Would that be okay?
One, you'd still have to adopt it annually as part of your annual reorganization process.
salary,
The
the salary,
the
yes.
specific
Yep.
salary. As a general rule, our CCHA policies don't lift specific statutory references in our policies because sometimes they change. And again, we'd rather talk about the language in the statute rather than list the specific statute, knowing how challenging it can be to update your policies. But, I mean, you can do that, or you can do, given how long it took them to make this change, I don't anticipate a change happening anytime soon, but up to you.
And it
You can do it
adjusts,
either way.
this change,
Okay.
it adjusts each year as long as the starting
Right.
teacher salary adjusts.
But you can certainly have it, annual compensation shall be, capped at a maximum of the, 10% of.
I tend to agree with Mr. McGyver that we adopt the language of the legislation and then have the board select each January.
And Mr. McIver, this is a bylaw, so the voting requirements are different than for other policies. Can you remind me?
I would have to go back and look as we have amended the policies. It used to be the case.
Used to be
Under
5-2.
the old
Yeah.
setup overall, that bylaws did require a separate vote. I don't know that that distinction is still in place
Is it
under
not?
the new policies.
Okay.
These policies don't distinguish, so this would be your standard approvement process.
So it'd be majority, not 5-2. Like it used to be. It used to be 2/3, which required 5-2, I think, previously. Okay.
So I have a clarifying question on the filling a vacancy section still. The way I read it, the person appointed to fill a vacancy doesn't, it says they must be from within the boundaries of the school corporation, so they don't have to come from within the boundaries of the district of the person being replaced, is that correct?
This is our template policy, so if, understanding you all have specific sections where you need to have folks come from, then yes, they would have to come from the electoral district if you're replacing someone.
So it should be worded somehow,
Yes, so we
the
will
boundaries
need-
of the district that the vacancy represents or something?
Yes,
Okay.
we need to make that update.
Remind me, members of the cabinet, we dug into this weeks ago when we met and did Policy Palooza over at those tables. And I believe we looked this up, and the existing Neola policy also read the same way.
Okay.
Or either that or it was legislative language. Do you remember, Mike?
You all, will check the statute before we bring it back to the full board, but the distinction that I think applied to you all was even though you run from a district, because voters in every district get to vote for every school board member, every slot, there were distinctions within the law that are different than if you only get to vote for the person from your district. That was a different set of rules than our setup, where a board member who is able to be elected by people across the district can vote. And so I think the context we were looking at, was the question came up, even what if somebody moved? And that would not be, as I recall, that would not be an issue. Again, I think it ties back to the fact that everybody votes for everybody.
Is it
So-
the opinion, your opinion, Dale, that if it's not required by legislative language, that we would prefer to have our policy reflect that they need to live in the district that they would be elected in the next time that they were on the ballot?
It feels odd to me that you're required to live in the district to run for an office, but not to be appointed to fill it.
I
It just
agree.
feels inconsistent. I did notice the old one refers to them as qualified candidates, and I thought maybe that's implied in qualified, is that you have to, part of what qualifies you to be the representative is that you live in the district that you're representing. So maybe it was implied in that originally, but
I like having it specified, and I agree that they should be from the district of the seat that's becoming vacant.
It makes sense, because
Then
at
I
the
agree.
conclusion of that term, in order for them to run
Right.
again, they have to live in that district anyway. So it would make sense. Okay. We'll double check and then make corrections accordingly.
Well, it's a weird election, right? Because you're in a district, but you're voted on at large. So if you're the person for your district, and to Dale's point, if Nikki and Logan live on total opposite sides of the county, one's on the east, one's on the west. If one of the two of them were to step away for whatever reason and fill it with a person from the same side as the one that's remaining, you just somewhat disenfranchise the voters in that old district. Even though it's weird how it's an at-large thing, you still have to have the person in the beginning be from that district. So it makes sense to fill it with someone from that
I
district.
totally agree. I assume the rationale historically was to make sure that geographically we have representatives from around the district.
And I think just for people that don't have the benefit of having these in front of them, the major change here is that because of this statute change, if a vacating member was affiliated with a major political party when they were elected, their party gets to pick their replacement. But they would still have to be in the district, I think is what we're discussing. They would have to be in the district of the vacant seat. If a person runs without a political party affiliation, which is still possible to do, then it would be the board who would choose based on candidates who apply. And it would be a majority vote for that vote if it's 3-3, because you're going to have one person not there. So now you have an even number. The decision would go to the circuit court for an appointment, which for us is, remind me, Chad, I'm so sorry.
Judge Kelly Benjamin.
Kelly, yes. Judge Benjamin would make the decision for us, as an example.
Going back to the beginning of B200 eligibility, it talks about you have to follow your organization plan for eligibility in elections, and that's where you've filed that plan with the State Board of Education saying what your districts are. So you're required to follow that first, and that follows through for any of the positions. So I think that piece is incorporated by reference, even though we don't lay out your specific electoral districts within this policy, because you've already filed it with the State Board of Ed. So if, yeah, so if one of your board members who represents a district would step aside, if they had filed that they are a member of a political party, then that political party would choose their successor. If they file as not acknowledging a party, then the board would appoint someone who is eligible from that district. And it would be the same if the political party chose. You'd still have to have someone who is from that district.
Okay.
Thank you. I think adopting the language from the other one that states that the candidate must be a qualified candidate would cover all of those criteria.
I do like the idea of specifying that they need to be from the district in the policy, since this is what most people would read. I know it seems redundant based on that very thorough explanation, which I am totally buying into. It just could be confusing.
Well, if you put it in section 2 and then refer later to say as defined in section 2, then it covers everything, right?
We can certainly put in your electoral districts in section 2 to duplicate what your plan says, if you would like that, so.
Okay, thank you very much. At this rate, we'll get through 4 policies before you have to leave, Ms. Wilden. We'll get rolling along. Second policy in the group should hopefully require much less discussion because there are no changes to any of the substantive changes to board meetings, which is B225. Replaces a lot of Neola policies, and this encompasses all of those things from the Neola policies, but all of the requirements for virtual participation and attendance are all captured in B225. Any questions or comments on this one?
So I don't want to be the one who slows us down, but these are the only 2 I had questions on, actually. And maybe it's implied and I don't quite see it, but clarifying question. Under electronic participation, and it's the second to the last paragraph there, a member of the school board may not participate by electronic communication if the school board is attempting to take final action to do any of the following. So we have done that, and the person who's joining electronically just doesn't vote on those things. They're still participating in the meeting. Is that what this means? Okay.
That's correct. They are welcome to participate. They're just not allowed to vote on those specific items.
They can vote on other issues.
They can vote on other issues. They just can't vote on those specific topics.
Okay, thanks.
We can add a parenthetical vote afterwards, after participate. Let the attorneys argue over that one.
Yep, we can, may not vote.
Yeah, that actually helps if it says vote instead of participate.
Anything else on B225? Okay, next policy is school board member ethics. This is just actually taking some policy. It's already in one of the policies from Churchill and Antrim because we did not know at the time it was going to be in a separate policy. So this school board member ethics is actually word for word adopted directly from the Indiana School Boards Association Code of Ethics. It has been in BCSE's board policies for decades. And so this would replace Neola policy 0144.2, but is also currently in B100. And so if we adopted this B250, we would remove that language from B100 because it's going to move right over here. It would be repetitive at that point. But it's literally the School Board Association's Code of Ethics.
Can I ask if there's any recommendations or examples of what happens in the event a board member fails to adhere to the member ethics policy?
As with any time a board member is not adhering, it is to the rest of the board to ask the board member to realign their behavior to be in compliance with the Board of Ethics. And if they're not, then to sanction them from the board table. You don't have the power to remove them, only the county court does, but, you know, this is the standard that you're asking everyone to apply to, so.
There's no examples of even something as benign as that being added to the policy. I just,
You want samples to?
or in the event that a board member fails to adhere to board ethics, then what? Is it the responsibility of the executive team, or like what happens? You just verbalized something. I'm just asking if there's a written version of that somewhere that would be appropriate to add. I've been asked, so what?
Got it. No, I understand.
And so I'm trying to see if there's a good option to add while we're in here making changes.
I wouldn't recommend adding it to B250 because that's just aligned with the ISBA Board of Ethics. Give me a second and I'll give you some thoughts.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll come back to that one.
So are we on 250 now? Oh, we were, okay. So just two really minor things, and it's just the way it's worded seems weird to me, but maybe okay. The first one, it says a school board member should honor the high responsibility that membership demands. Membership just sounds like a club, right? And so I was thinking it might sound better, a school board member should honor the high responsibility the position demands, because it's an elected position. So it just sounded different to me. And then in that same first section, it says recognizing responsibility as a state official. Are we, when I see state official, I don't think of local. So I didn't know, are we really state officials, or would we be county official? And we're really not even a county official because we have other districts in our county that aren't part of our school district.
So again, these are word for word from the Indiana School Board Association. So you could choose to change it, but it's written so that you are in alignment with all of the other school boards across the state who follow this. To your specific questions, state official, you are elected under the state of Indiana. So when you think about your suit is a subsection of the state.
Okay.
So, and then your second one was members, and I hear what you're saying about club member, but you're also a school board member, so.
Yep, yeah, no, I do understand. It sounds more.
I get it.
Yeah. And so then the very last one, and I understand how it's written, but the very, very last one, where it talks about maintain a commitment to the community, it says earn the community's confidence that all is being done in the best interest of school children. And my view is we should add to that the school children, the teachers, the staff, and other employees. Because it's different than the very first line item, which is always thinking in terms of students first, because this is now talking about the commitment in the community, which is bigger than just the kids. So
can I throw two comments in on that? I think the word membership is intentional because it's the school board members are members of a group. And if you're in a position that's more of could be interpreted as more of an isolated position. I don't know what other word to put in there. And the last one, everything that we do to help teachers and staff is in the best interest of children. So I think that's all inclusive when we say that. And that should be continually be our focus. I mean, we do what we do for teachers because of kids, not because of teachers.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. I just, because it was in the community, it was about adding more than just the kids in the statement to identify that the community is bigger than just kids. That was the only thing.
All right, thank you very much. The next policy is C200, anti-bullying. This one also, the one real substantive change compared to the existing policy also came out of the most recent legislative session and requires parental notification in the event of an investigation into bullying. Adds a timeline of within 2 days that the administration has contacted both the family of the alleged bully and the alleged target of the bullying. Other than that, the substance of the policy remains unchanged. Any questions or comments on C200? Okay, thank you. The next policy is C225. This is one that the board has actually looked at in the last couple of years and spent a good amount of time on. What we have done in this proposed policy is request one change. So, to put it in layman's terms, what the board passed a couple of years ago is an opt-in survey policy, meaning unless you, as a parent, opt your child into one of these surveys, then you will not participate regardless. We cannot give you the survey. We have one survey that this district has participated for over 40 years. It used to be called the Indiana Prevention Resource Center. It used to be called the Drug and Alcohol Use Survey. It's now called the INYS, the Indiana Youth Survey, administered through Indiana University's, I'm sorry, I don't remember the Office of Health and Human Services or something to that effect at Indiana University. It is, since we put the opt-in policy and we administered this a year and a half ago, the participation dropped dramatically. This is the policy, or sorry, this is the survey that we used to develop our metrics for our students are safe and well. It's the question, do you feel safe at school? It also has all those questions that some of us of a certain age at the table remember. How many times in the last 1 week have you used alcohol? And then the students respond to that survey. It's consistent with what you've seen from that in the past. But those 3 to 4 metrics that we've narrowed down, that strategic focus area of students are safe and well, those come directly from this survey. So having robust participation in it is important to us. Now, the state law still requires that we follow all those requirements identified in this policy, that you post the survey on the website for everyone to see, you send home notification and request to have the student participate with a link to access the materials on the survey. Then you send out another one if they still don't respond to that. Then you have to wait more days after you've jumped through all of those hoops. A student who had no form turned back that said either yes or no, they would be asked to participate in the survey, going back to the level where we can increase that participation rate. So what's written into this proposed policy for you today is that one paragraph on the second page is that it accepts the the bottom of the first page going over into the second page, that it exempts that INYS survey from the opt-in policy and makes it an opt-out policy. But still with all the requirements that parents would receive 2 written notifications plus the messages sent home via Parent Square, and the survey would be posted on the website. Outside of that, all of it is consistent with the policy that this board just approved a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago or so, and as well as the human sexuality curriculum changes that were just legislatively amended during 2025 session, and you just participated in just a meeting or two ago. Happy to answer any questions about the INYS survey or any of the other items in the C-225. Okay, thank you very much. Next on the list is C-250, which is a family engagement policy that every district that participates in federal Title I programming is required to have in place. Basically comes directly from the federal statute requiring us to have this Title I parent and family engagement policy in place. We send notifications home to every family who attends a Title I school, informing of them of their rights and expectations as a parent. Any questions or concerns on C-250? Okay, the next one is a withdrawal from school policy. This is for, again, meets the Indiana code regarding a student who wants to drop out of high school and has all of the timelines and requirements for the principal of the building to conduct an exit interview, as well as provide information about what happens in the long-term income expectations for a student who drops out of high school versus one who has a high school education or college education. And there's no substantive change for this policy compared to our existing one. But happy to answer any questions or ask Charles about any questions on C-600.
On this one, the second paragraph says, if the principal denies the withdrawal of the student may appeal the denial to the school board president and the superintendent in writing. But it's not real clear what happens. Does it go then to, like if it goes to the board president and the superintendent, do the two of them make the decision? Is the board involved? It just wasn't real clear with that. So I didn't know if there could be a little more substance there to just say what happens after notification. It says within 5 days after the principal's denial. So it's just making sure that there's something there that says what the two of you would do then.
That's a good question. That when we first read it, it only said the school board president. We added in superintendent, so there would at least be two people being notified so that they were aware that the appeal had occurred. But we could not remember an instance where anything this had ever occurred in BCSC.
I don't know why. I don't think it would be a problem, like the two of you making that decision with this, but there's just nothing there. There's just nothing there that says this is what you do. Like you're given notice, but then you do nothing, you know. And so the only other thing I saw too, and this is kind of just across the board. There's places that you'll see this. If a student withdraws without consent from the principal, he shall be considered a dropout. Just a he/she. That way, or you could just take he/she out and put the student. Right? Either way, just anywhere there's a he, there's a she.
Thank you. Yep. Any other questions on C-600? Okay. Next one is evaluation of the superintendent. D-125 replaces Neola policy 1240. It has some language changes based on what the differences between Neola policy and the Churchill and Antrim policies, but substantively not a meaningful change. Any questions on D-125 or suggestions?
Do those statutes dictate the date by which we have to have it concluded? Is that what's in those? Because I think we have an actual date where we have to submit the evaluation. Was that in the old policy, or did I just know that because Dr. Stahlbaum told me?
The dates were in Neola, and I'm not sure, but I'll have to check. It seems like that might be one of the things that they've taken out of the statutory requirement, but I'll check her statute in a second.
Okay. It's good to give us a target,
You know,
by the way,
deadlines are
Dr.
helpful.
Stahlbaum. So we'll do what you say if it's not written here, but if it was written in here, it'd be a good reminder. So.
the very least, an annual requirement. I
And-
don't,
Yes,
Right.
yes, agree.
anything else on D125? Okay, the next one, D300, I apologize that the version that was posted online, you could see the comments, the board could see comments over with Dr. Bozeman's notes to use existing language from 4162 and 3162. Just because it's what we had in place now, and we preferred it, the specificity of this language compared to what was in here, but it didn't get updated in the version that was posted on board docs. But it just refers back to the language from 3162 and 4162.
So what we have here, this is now got all that information in there?
Correct.
Okay.
We will send it out with the updated, older information, contradictory, updated and older at the same time, but from existing policy. It doesn't change the meaning of anything, it's just consistent with what we've had in the past, and both the folks in the Transportation Department and Dr. Bozeman preferred the language that was in the existing policy.
So, Dr. Bozeman, one question I did have here is where it says the corporation's FMCSA DOT Drug and Alcohol Testing Program Manual. Do we have that in is it a separate manual, or would that be best in a administrative guideline or something? Because it stands out there like it's important, but I didn't know how we tie to that, if it's a link or something.
It is not currently, it's within the training material for drivers, but we can add it as a link. Is that what you're asking?
Well, if maybe we just, if we could just reference which is included in training material provided to blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
That way, because when I looked at it, I was like, corporations program manual, blah, 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 right? It's like, where is that? And could I find it if I needed to?
Sure. Yep, it's all the federal DOT training and such, but yeah, we can add some clarity to that.
Yeah, and then there's, I don't know the best way to put this in order. And I'm looking at the one that was posted online, but there was one here with drivers with an alcohol concentration of 0.2 to 0.4. I felt like that should maybe move up higher in the list. And this is not in the one that's printed in the packet. So this is on the one that's online, so it may be cleared up. But I felt like that was really important to define that, because then there were prohibited behavior was another one where there's a couple of conflicts in what we received earlier, because it says something about
Mr.
Point-
Major, I hate to interrupt you, I apologize. Those are the two sections that
That
we're
are
taking
gone?
the
Okay,
language.
all right,
Those are
okay.
you're referring to exactly to the two sections that we're referring, we're going back to the language from existing policy.
Okay,
So I
that'll
just
work
didn't
then.
want you to
Nope, we're
waste your
good
time.
then, we're good.
We'll send out that updated language probably tomorrow too.
I did have two questions. On prohibited behavior, it's one of the new, like the yellow sections in here. There's two bullets in there that I think are the same thing, unless I don't maybe understand the context. So the second bullet says, no employee shall use alcohol while performing safety-sensitive functions. I feel like we kind of want no employee using alcohol, period, while performing any functions. I'm just wondering.
Hence the reason that's the section we're replacing.
but
One of
then-
the reasons we're
okay,
replacing that section.
Okay, and then there was a second bullet, shall report for duty. Another bullet says you shouldn't report to duty or use alcohol at any time. They were in the same.
Right.
All going away, or we're leaning more towards that one?
All referring, all of that section, that prohibited behavior section, will change back to the language from our existing policy.
Yeah, the only other two small things I had is, this is still in there. The last section, it's got line item B, which is an alcohol confirmation test with a concentration of 0.00. Previously, and maybe it's in the section that's taken out, where it said anything 0.02 or below could be considered a false positive, basically. And so if we maintain that 0.02, like a 0.01, if it's considered a false positive potentially, then we just need to make sure that we don't have a problem with someone in the future where they get fired for 0.01 and because of the 0.0. So I don't know if that's something that we can just look at that and make sure the final has the consistency there. And then
That's exactly some of the problems. As we read through it, we were very, very confused at times.
And then the only other, for every policy thing that I give, like the he, she, they, whoever, is develop administrative guidelines. So if we have those, and those are part of what we're looking to do, if we can see those when we go through the policy at the same time. I don't know that you'll have any for this, but it's just a general comment.
Thank you.
And maybe this is just for Dr. Stahlbaum, it doesn't need to be in the policy, but I've never asked the question. Employees who suspect they may have an alcohol or drug abuse problem are encouraged to seek counseling and information on a confidential basis and may also contact Human Resource Office for a list of available resources. So what do those look like? Do we just have addiction cessation programs that we partner with to help employees or something else? Okay.
We do have an agreement with an EAP program, both to receive counseling, or we could encourage them to go through their private provider. But we have a list of resources, both for students and staff, that we provide when someone's in need. Okay, thank you very much. Next one is FMLA, Family and Medical Leave Act. Might be the switch from the longest set of policies we have to the shortest, the biggest change. As the recommendation, and Dr. Stahlbaum was in full agreement with this, the recommendation from Church, Churchill, and Antrim is to have a Family Medical and Leave Act policy that refers to the federal law and then points to administrative guidelines, as those have to change so often. Nothing with what we do today would change based on this policy, and we will still, until we switch over from the administrative guidelines that are currently on the website in the Neola structure, until we switch those, these will just refer to the existing Neola administrative guidelines that are in place. Questions on this very brief FMLA policy? All right. Next one is a D500 is SRO, employment and training. This is a new policy. Really, it's required that we have that second to last paragraph there. The corporation will enter into an MOU with law enforcement who will fulfill the duties of an officer, and the MOU will state the nature and scope of the officer's responsibility. That was a new piece of legislation. So that part was required. We thought it was appropriate to go ahead and adopt the whole policy that identified that anyone who is an SO or an SRO for us will meet those training requirements in the 40 hours of training before becoming an officer.
And does the MOU have a time frame on it? Is there guidelines? Can it be 1 year, 5 years? What? I don't know what that looks like. Do we have to do that every year?
It is up to you on what memorandum you want to, an understanding you want to have with whoever is providing your SROs. So I've seen other school corporations with 1 year, with 5 years, with 3 years. It's however you want to make that agreement.
Ours is currently evergreen, the one that's been in place with both CPD and the Sheriff's Department.
It is evergreen. We do review it every year with both of those agencies, though.
So It says training must be completed within 180 days from the date the individual is assigned the duties. Is it not required before they start?
By statute, I assume not. By a practice, everybody has fully been trained before they assume that role as an SRO.
I think that might be important for people to know. So we are requiring them to have it done before they start.
We've been fortunate to have a pool of interested candidates that already have had that basic training in the past. I'll leave it to you all to decide. I'd be a little hesitant in case down the road, if that weren't the case and there was some sort of situation to fill somebody in, that they could not do that over and above what the statute says. But we've been fortunate in our situation. We have interested folks in the hopper, so to speak, that have had their NASRO training.
I'm assuming through job description and interview process, we have to put that in there, but you guys are making sure before we even get the person that the training is not going to be a concern.
Yes, that's a fair assumption, yeah.
So it's a requirement, but ish.
Very loose.
It's a requirement, but we've been fortunate to have them well-trained in everything before they set foot in the role here, so yes.
What do you do if you have people, like, you said when you backfill? Like, are you talking like when they retire or when they're ill?
So we backfill now. We have an agreement with both their sheriff's department and CPD that if there's an absence, so long as they have folks available, which they do, they're very good about helping us, they will backfill even on day-to-day absences for SROs. And those people are NASRO trained also. But again, we're in a fortunate position now because there are people that are interested in these roles and are trained. So that would be the case also if there was a longer-term leave, which we've experienced also.
And I'll just point out, complimenting both CPD and the Sheriff's Department, they have great interest in having even their non-school resource officers trained at NASRO. They send several officers there because they know having a deep bench of those folks is good for us as a district and us as a community. So kudos to CPD and the Sheriff's Department for that. They know it really helps when they have an absence and they know they're sending someone. It's in their best interest to send someone in to fill in who is trained to be an effective school resource officer as well. Okay, D500, SRO Employment and Training. The next one is E175, and that is student records. That is also one that has no substantive changes compared to existing policy. Any questions on E175? Okay, thank you. Next policy is F100, Internal Controls and Reporting of Losses, Shortages, Variances, or Thefts. This is also a policy that provides some real clarity compared to the existing policy, but doesn't change the substance of the existing policies in place. But it replaces 8 existing Neola policies. Establishes a threshold of $5,000 for reporting of losses to the State Board of Accounts and law enforcement.
In the internal control section, it says to implement internal control standards and procedures. I just put change to administrative guidelines, just to maintain consistency from policy to policy.
The only other thing, I think in the second paragraph, we have the Assistant Superintendent for Finances and Operations, which I think is Dr. Bozeman. But we've had those separated before and now they're together. I just don't know if you always want it to be together or could you put Superintendent for Finances and whether that was included other responsibilities or not. At least you don't have to change your policy with the change of a title. Does that make sense?
It does. We just have changed a lot of them so far this year to reflect that.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
it
okay.
does make sense. And that's why so many of them say superintendent or designee instead of that. But point well taken. We'll look at always being consistent in that way. Okay, next policy is E. No, we're going the wrong direction again. This is F-175, collection and forgiveness of bad debt. And again, this one does not have any meaningful or substantive change compared to the existing policy.
I
But
don't,
happy to answer any questions.
you made it bold, which you don't see in every policy. I just wondered why that one section was bold, but I'll read it because I did have a question on it. If the uncollectible debt is a student lunch account, cannot be an expense to the school food service account and must be covered by non-federal funds. Is that a statute, a best practice?
No, that, federal statute, so
Okay.
one of the federal school lunch guidelines requires that you can't pay that off with their federal funds, so.
Someone who edited that just felt strongly they wanted to be bold about that statement. Although when we were reviewing this, Mr. McIver, if anything was in federal code, it was italic. Anything in state code would have been bold. Something like that would have helped us as we looked up a lot of laws that day.
So the second paragraph starts, the school corporation may forgive, waive, write off. Who in the school corporation does that? That was one where maybe having a little definition around, is that the assistant superintendent in charge of finance, blah, blah, blah. Do they make the decision? Or that kind of felt like it was open to maybe a principal, Dr. Bozeman or yourself possibly. And so I just maybe get a little bit of clarity there. That way people know who's going to do that. There's one that says down lower below what Nikki just read, the superintendent may develop regulations addressing. So again, that's the administrative guidelines. And then this one, I kind of struggle with this a little bit. In the case where a positive balance exists in the account, the balance will be returned to the account over if it exceeds $15. What if it's $14.99? If that parent paid in advance money, that, to me, it seems like if there's any positive amount, that we should at least do everything we can to return it. And if the parent obviously doesn't respond and every effort's made, it says that it goes to the corresponding school fund. What my hope was is we could have that then go to a lunch scholarship fund.
That's exactly what
Is
it
that
does
what it
in
is?
practice.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's where it was going.
Both of those things in practice are what we do. If the
Okay.
parent requests that we send them a check for $4, we send them a check for $4.
Okay.
But in, the vast majority of cases, they say, I don't bother with it. So this just allows us to not return it.
Yep.
But we do, and then if that balance just goes towards a fund that helps pay for lunches.
Pay for lunch,
students
and
that are in
that's
need.
all, okay, thank you.
All right, the next policy is fundraising and crowdfunding. This is one that surprisingly took a significant amount of time and discussion on our part. It's one of those things it's new enough that we really struggle with balancing allowing teachers to take advantage and staff to take advantage of the technology that exists and the platforms to really benefit their students, but also to protect both of them as an individual as well as the district, in the case of any accusations of inappropriate activity or fraud or theft. And so we do recognize in practice that any individual employee of ours can go onto a crowdfunding website and say, I teach second grade in Columbus, Indiana, and I'm raising funds for fill in the blank, and ask for that money, and it goes to their account, and we have nothing to do with it. And if they're accused of unethical, fraudulent activity, and they're using that to go on a vacation somewhere, that is something, obviously, we don't want them to do, but it's not something that was authorized by BCSE. If they say, I'm a BCSE teacher in second grade in Columbus, Indiana, they have now identified that's a BCSE fundraising or crowdfunding platform. So it gets pretty touchy. We had to make both adjustments to policy to move towards where we think we want to be, and then also practice to speak with principals and staff about making sure we move away from just anyone can put anything out there anywhere. So it took some time and effort to develop the fundraising and crowdfunding policy. Essentially, the requirements are that they're using a platform that has been approved, and so it's not a platform that takes an exorbitant percentage of the, of the funds as an overhead. It's limited to a certain dollar amount of $5,000 or more, and then a large, requirement of this is that if you represent yourself as a BCSE teacher, when funds are raised and then items are purchased, that is now, those items are the property of BCSE and the school and/or classroom where they were raised for. And so if that teacher moves to another school, the policy reads, if the teacher moves to another school in BCSE, they can talk with the principal and say, do you want us to bring this? Do you want to leave it here? But that teacher cannot take that material home and say, it's mine, I fundraised for it on my own, if that makes sense. It's one of those that I'm sure will continue to evolve as this becomes more and more common. But I'm happy to answer any questions, or looking over towards Laura and Charles over there too.
Well, I was even going to ask Ms. Keel, since she's in the room and sitting there so quietly, what would be the perspective of teachers of this? Do you have any thoughts, or do you think this is reasonable, or, you think it's reasonable as written? Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I think the biggest concern I have would be policing, where you got X number of teachers and you only have X number of people that monitor it. And then how do you ensure that the $5,000 goes into the proper account? I think that's just the tricky part with this one. I think it's a creative way to get additional funds for teachers. But I think it also puts a little bit of risk out there that somebody doesn't understand it and they do the wrong thing. What happens? Do they get in trouble for it, right? I mean, and then there's going to be somebody in the world that will try to take advantage of it. And so it's just managing all that so that nothing bad happens.
Any other questions or concerns on fundraising and crowdfunding? To be clear, we do not have any teachers or staff members at all that I believe would take advantage of this. This is in place to protect them and say, they can tell anyone who asks, I am not allowed to receive funds directly at all. BCSE's policy prevents me from receiving funds directly, prevents them from being accused of things from someone who wants to say, you've stolen money from me or from someone else.
Question.
The question, just in case that couldn't be heard on the YouTube channel, was, I think, is there a place that we direct new employees to go to find kind of policies like this to make sure that they know what the right thing to do is?
Certainly something we could integrate if we don't already into the new teacher orientation.
Yeah, we go over some of those high-level policies at New Teacher Orientation, the ones that they'll intersect with mostly, and so we talk about those. We also refer them to where they can find our policies on the website, all staff, not just teachers. But this could be some language that we utilize during our New Teacher Orientation to make sure they know what to say.
pertain to PTO too?
No, PTOs are required by the State Board of Accounts to be separate entities, both financially and legally from the school. Although we know there's always an association. If you are the Southside PTO, for example, there's an association with Southside there, but
So their policies
they
are
have
coming
separate
from
books.
somewhere else?
Correct. They have their own bylaws in place. Good question, though. Okay, next policy on the list is F300. It's time and effort, which is a technical federal term referring to anyone who's paid using from a federal grant are required to track their time and effort. Specifically, it's really for those that are paid from both state or local funds and federal funds, just to prove that you're not using federal funds to kind of supplant your state funding there. So it's a technical requirement of us having federal grants, but happy to answer any questions about time and effort policy. Pretty straightforward.
Dr. Phillips, if I can interrupt. So with Mrs. Wielden saying she will have to leave, our policies do say no business if we don't have a quorum. So in the interest of, if folks have specific comments on specific policies, I don't know if we want to call for those now in case we have to stop before we're done.
Thank you, Mr. McIver. I didn't realize that. Let me call in reinforcements as another option just in case. Okay, hold on. Keep going.
Okay.
Don't wait
You
for
said
me to
hang
get
on.
there,
I
right?
didn't know.
Go. Sorry.
I meant,
Sorry.
that's all right. Okay, next policy on the list is G100, which is facility and transportation safety. This one does not have really larger or meaningful substantive changes compared to the existing policy. Any questions on G100? Main requirements here are allowing us notification that people are being audio or video monitored if they're on property, that we conduct drills, and then some technical requirements for if and when we pick up students on one side of the road in a bus for the safety of those students, obviously.
It has that if a school bus driver must load or unload an elementary school student at a location that requires the student to cross a roadway that is a U.S. route or state route, the superintendent or designee shall present the route to the school board for approval. I don't remember ever seeing one, but my memory's not very good. So was this always in place and we just don't have any of those situations? Or is this new?
No, that was added not too long ago, but we purposefully, very purposefully do not unload children where they have to walk across a highway.
Okay. I knew that was always our intent. I just didn't know if there was literally 0 cases where that happened. So you're confirming. Thank you. I'm good until 6:30.
Okay, thanks. Okay, next policy is G1, no, that's the one before it. G125 is criminal organization activity. This is a gang prevention policy that's been in place for a long period of time. Church actually tags it as an optional policy now. It's not required. It's one of the things that the legislature said you don't have to do, that you once had to do in the past. But I'm looking at the attorneys with much appreciation, but they don't like when you take things away. Even if the legislature says you don't have to have this in place anymore, tends to be the case that we leave most of those things in place. But it's a continuation of the existing policy. But happy to answer any questions about G125 that you have.
Just some real quick things. It says a criminal organization activity is a student who knowingly, intentionally, all right? Is this just intended to be for students? Okay, because I didn't know if we want to just strike that and put an individual, because then anybody that came onto our property, whether they're a student, an employee, or a participant at a football game, like, they can't do organized activities like this at all. This is just focused on students.
This is specifically to help prevent gang activity in our schools and protect students from gang activity.
So then that jump to the end where it talks about intervention services. The principal may provide intervention or relevant support services to a student. Would that need to have also with parent notification or parent permission? Because I don't know that I saw that in there. It's the last paragraph.
Does talk about family support services and enlist parent cooperation. So it implies that parents are being notified, but we can certainly add parental notification if you'd like.
Yeah, I would rather, I mean, we've added it in other places. I would not imply that here, because if someone were to provide intervention or a support service and a parent would not have wanted that, then, I mean, obviously you would think a parent would want that, some help. But if they did not, we don't want to end up with having to talk to a different set of lawyers. So.
All right, anything else on G125? All right, thank you. The next is chemical management and preparedness for toxic hazard, essentially storage and usage of toxic materials, which is relatively common both inside and outside of our schools and science departments and grounds and maintenance departments. So, but it does not represent a substantive change. But we're happy to answer any questions you have on G175.
I think the only thing I had, Dr. Bozeman, there were two small things. One, when we think about chemical management and cleaners and things like that, do we have a location where MSDS sheets are housed, maybe online, that if a parent knows that a kid is allergic to something, that either they can check that, or if we have that on our incoming student information where we could identify that, so that if we're using, I'm gonna just say a cleaner with bleach, and just say a kid's allergic to cleaners with bleach, then they at least, the parents know in advance, or the school knows. There's that, and then just curious, I've read toxic hazard preparedness officer. I was curious who that was.
I was as well when I first read that, Mr. Major. So we, this policy is actually the administrative guidelines that go with it, have a listing of all of what you're citing of specific chemicals. Antonia Frazita is our manager of custodial services. She would serve as that
Okay.
rep, and then also working with the high school science department chairs to double check the list on both sides of that, because there is some crossover between the two.
Okay, so it's more of a committee. So, okay,
She would be the lead on it, but yes.
thank you.
Thank you. The next one is environmental health and safety issues, commonly referred to as indoor air quality. I believe that's the Neola policy that it replaced. And this policy, again, not a substantive change from existing policies that are in place. And just a brief history lesson, there used to be a part of our teacher's contract that was 20-plus pages long, maybe 26 pages long. That was just the indoor air quality section of the teacher's contract. When those contracts were mandated to cut out anything that wasn't salary and benefits and salary-related benefits. We moved that over to a handbook, and it remains there, guides the work that we do and the conversations we have with folks in buildings about indoor air quality and what they can and can't do inside those classrooms with carpets and whatnot. Happy to answer any questions on G200.
Martin Roberts.
Thank you.
Indoor air quality
He is our-
coordinator is Martin Roberts, who's also our energy manager.
And then the only other thing I had on this one was, it said, last sentence, each facility shall meet criteria established by the Indiana Department of Health. Is there like an annual report that could be shared with us just to help us understand, how things look?
I'm not aware of an annual report. There are guidelines that we have on our facilities and maintenance website of maintaining relative humidity in classrooms, relative temperature ranges, that sort of thing that
With a wink, the only reason why I'm asking is if it says meet criteria, I don't know what the Indiana Department of Health's criteria is. As long as that's what you're doing, I think we're okay. But then it would be good if there's anything in that we need to know about to just understand. We talk a lot about facility improvements. If you need to improve an air conditioning unit for whatever reason, if there's an air quality issue with one facility, what filtration do we need to look at? And then that helps us understand more about facility needs, so.
Sure, yep, I understand, thanks.
Okay, next policy is G350, which is audio, video, and digital recording on school property and of school meetings. And this is also a policy that was relatively recently updated to adhere to the guidelines of live streaming board meetings and other requirements of those meetings. Happy to answer any questions you have about G350.
I think the only thing I had was the prior conversation that we had where it was noted about the state law and recording. So as long as we're not in conflict with that in a way that would pose a problem in the future where somebody would come in and say, I recorded this because I wanted to and state law allows me versus policy. Just how do we keep the risk low?
Thank you. And we will go, that was the school visitors policy that we just looked at during the last work session. So under that, meetings in Roman numeral 3 and classrooms and other school property, we will make sure that that language is consistent between the two so that there's no question about what the policy states.
I was going to say, I like the sentence, nothing in this policy shall be interpreted as an interference with an individual's constitutional rights. I think that is helpful to just reinforce, so I appreciate that. And then if a parent or guardian wishes to record a meeting, corporation requests a 24-hour notice prior to the scheduled meeting. So I think a request is the right language as well. If it happens right before the meeting and everybody's okay, that's also fine. But it's at least setting the expectation, which I think supports what we intend.
Thank you. Okay, the next policy is G400. Again, this is another requirement to receive federal grants that you have to have a Title I comparability policy in place. Essentially, what this is stating is that you are going to continue to spend the same or very close to equivalent amount of state and federal or state and local money in a school that is not receiving federal funds as you are in a school that is receiving federal funds. Again, so you're not taking the money coming from the feds and supplanting your required state and local investment in that school and those students who attend the school. Any questions about the G400 policy?
I'm just looking ahead, and I can't believe we have a policy that outlines the prohibition of unmanned aircraft in our school system.
Go to any evening event out there,
I'm sure.
and
I'm sure it's for good reason.
you will see And even going back, I want to say 5, 6 years ago, we had drones flying over our events with students and staff in the crowd above them. So it's in place for a reason. But we do have, the policy does allow for exemptions when obviously the person is trained, it's a school personnel or school media personnel from either school. It is very common now to see both teams using drones to film the football game and collect that data live and use it for, throughout the course of a game. Used to be a requirement you couldn't use recorded materials to coach your team during the game. That's gone away now at the high school level as well. So this policy says don't fly drones over our students or our facilities unless you get our permission first. Next policy is intellectual property ownership and revenue. This is one that Dr. Bozeman spent some time doing some pretty extensive research into. This is for staff who may, create materials that, generate revenue at some point in time from their intellectual property. And it does go further in clarifying what we would do than what our existing policy does. One of the primary decision points was if the revenues generated from materials that a teacher created while they were working for BCSC during work hours, the recommendation was to consider 30% of that revenue would remain the creators. Dr. Bozeman looked at some others and did some research and changed that to 50, and so that's our recommendation to the board, that would be a 50-50 split. But Dr. Bozeman is happy to answer any questions you have on this policy.
So a couple here, it says a creator who leaves the school employment, and it's got a whole bunch of stuff in there, and it says leave in the school's possession all materials, notes, equipment. When we go back a little bit and we think about the crowdfunding and all that, crowdsource, whatever, if a teacher were to purchase, I'm gonna just, $500 in equipment to help them make whatever change or thing or creative patentable item, and then they were to leave, it says they're supposed to leave the equipment here. But if they bought it with their own money, would we want to make sure that we pay them like fair value for the item? It doesn't have to be answered now. It's just something to think about, because that one, I struggle with that one. In categories of covered intellectual property, in the section, I guess it would be considered II or 2, it said S created with the school corporation resources. I didn't know if there was a word that got cut off there.
I just noticed that as well as we were getting into it.
Yep. And then the revenue, I struggle with this one because when I read revenue, I'm thinking money earned and not money at the end of the day. So just an example, if there was a publication, a teacher writes a book, and the book generates $100,000 in sales, that's revenue. They don't get 50% of that because it might have cost $70,000 to print and publish and distribute and sell the book. So to me, it felt more like net profit might be a better term than revenue, because then if you make $100,000 and it costs you nothing, then the net profit and the revenue are the same. But if you were to use that first example, you would give $50,000 to the individual. It would cost you $70,000 to print and publish and distribute, and you'd lose $20,000. So I didn't know if that profit might be a better word to use. That way it more accurately describes the amount of money that would be available for distribution.
I'm just going to blindly look look towards the attorneys on this. This is not something that we do. We don't get in the business of running schools to generate revenue from materials that teachers create. We hope that they do that and go off and become millionaires and really successful. If that's something that's in their pathway, we would just pick up the phone and call Mike, honestly, and say, this teacher created this material while on the clock working in our classrooms with our students. What do you think? And we're going to try to do what's best by the teacher, by the students and families, and by our school district while adhering to the law.
Back that, down in the paragraph, it says net revenues. That is what you're talking about, right, Jason?
Hold on just a second. Where is it?
When it refers to the term net.
50% of the net.
No, it's in revenue distribution, AIA. Creators shall receive 50% of net revenues.
Right, so it's net revenues,
Net, not gross.
right.
So,
So that's what you're talking about, that any of their costs have been subtracted off.
yeah, I understand, but when someone hears revenue, they're thinking about incomes. I'm just trying to get to the end, the profit at the end. So,
Dr. Phillips, we can look to add some clarifying language to that, if that's,
I'm going to keep looking at the attorneys and say,
Since
go
it's
right ahead.
capitalized, I think you can definitely have a definition of net revenues included that says, oh, and there it is. Net revenue on the front. Is that revenue remaining after deducting all fees, costs, and expenses incurred by the school? So, going back to your point on I, where it says the S, or in A, little 2, under categories of covered intellectual property. Thank you for checking that. We had an error in our form, but it should be, number 1 should finish, have the sole right to license or assign any interests, and then it really continues on. Somehow we've added a return that didn't need to be there and deleted the word interest. So it should be assign any interests created with school corporation resources.
Guaranteed business for you in the future, Mike. All right, that is G500. Just a few minutes left. Public records is H150, and this one simply straightforward follows the law and existing policy in regards to people, any public requests for records. Any questions on H150? All right, thank you. H200 is relations with special interest groups, and just clarifies what's consistent throughout many of the policies when it comes to that we tend to protect our students and families from special interest groups that wish to take advantage of them or sell to them. Questions on H200?
I wanted to get to 225.
Next one is public participation at board meetings, and H225, to the greatest extent possible, and we stay consistent with existing policy and the requirements of law that have evolved over the last few years.
The only thing that I wanted to have my fellow board members think about is the last item H. And maybe the lawyers here can help me. The portion of the meeting during which the participation of the public is invited shall be limited to 45 minutes. There have been times where we have had 20, even 30 people sign up, And obviously, I've been in this building past 11 p.m. during COVID. But I think that we want to be seen as an organization that wants to hear people out as well. So I'm just not sure, does that mean it has to be cut off at 45 minutes? Is there an ability for flexibility with the way it's worded? Would the rest of the board members all want there to be a very strict 45 minutes? And just, you know, I'm the one today that presides over this, and I may not be perfect at doing it, but just think about how you prioritize, and is it from top to bottom? And I don't know, it just gets a little messy. So, would like your thoughts.
So from a process standpoint, within G, it gives some certain powers to the presiding officer, and 6 in that list is waive the rules with approval of the board. That might often be interpreted by boards in situations where they maybe need to shut comment down if it's gotten unruly, but I think it would also apply the other way, where if
Okay.
the board said, we want to hear more commentary about this topic tonight, and we're gonna waive that requirement, I think that ability is there.
So and does that require like a motion and a vote, or is that just me looking up and down the table and getting a feel from the group as to whether or not they want to keep going? Is it?
If all of the heads were nodding and we heard yes, I think we would consider that approval.
Approval,
But, you
okay.
know, if it was questionable, I think we would make sure that we had a majority of the board in support.
Okay.
And I missed, Ms. Wielden, I missed that the existing policy that was approved last in June of 2023, it has the same requirement, but at the end of that sentence, it says, unless extended by the presiding officer. So we can just add that and finish that statement out, that you're comfortable with that? And I'm glad you get to decide to do that and not me. And when not to do that would be. Okay, next on the list is H250. This is also a policy that we, with Church Hill and Antrim's help, copied directly from the policy that was just adopted 2 years ago by the board on school library material removal request procedure. This was, it fell before under the public complaint policy number 9130. So this is just a clearer direction to, when you're looking for a policy to do this, this takes you right there. But this should be identical word for word from our existing policy 9130, the section of it that refers to library materials. Questions on H250? Okay, that was the last one. Almost made it. It's 9:30 or 9:30, 6:31. We did have on the agenda to, if we had time, to have an opportunity for those who attended the ISBA IPSS seminar a couple of weeks ago to share out, but we can move that to another meeting, do it at another time. That's all right with you?
Okay, so we don't gavel, I think we just say, have a good evening. Thank you, everyone, for your participation tonight. Appreciate it.